There are many places around the world that are famous for the inexplicable events that have unfolded there, some of which still have strange things going on a daily basis. Some of these places are known as UFO hotspots. Others have seen reports of strange, unknown creatures roaming around, while others exhibit strange properties such as magnetic fields that have a bizarre effect on objects and the people who venture too close. Number 10. Flashing lights in the sky are some of the most commonly reported strange phenomena in the world, as thousands of people have recounted seeing these bizarre objects at some point in their lives. These are usually rumored to be UFOs, as they're often seen traveling at impossible speeds, and have been simply vanishing into thin air without explanation. But a different kind of light can be seen in Joplin, Missouri. It's been given many names, including the Joplin Spook Light, the Hornet Spook Light, and the Tri-State Spook Light, and has been seen in the area for more than a century after it was first reported. But the light seems to be an enigma, as it doesn't always take on the same shape. Some people have stated that when they saw it, it was the size of a tennis ball, while others claim that it was a much bigger ball, about the size of a soccer ball. But one aspect of the spook light seems to be rather predictable, as it's always seen during or after sunset on a 4-mile stretch of road near Quapaw, Oklahoma, as the Devil's Promenade or Spook Light Road. While the light is usually seen in the same general area, it does sometimes display unpredictable behavior, as it seems to disappear when there's a lot of noise or large crowds nearby. It's also been seen hovering as high as a nearby tree line, while other witnesses describe seeing it move down the middle of the road before it inexplicably seems to blink out of existence. Some people have likened it to a lantern being carried down the road, as it's often seen as swaying from side to side. Since the light's origin has never been determined, many theories and legends have spawned as to what causes it. Some theories are more outlandish, while others take a more practical approach in an attempt to explain it. One well-known legend is that of a miner that lived in the area. When he returns home to his cabin one night after a hard day's work, he finds that it's been burned down by people unknown, and his family is nowhere to be found. It's said that the light is that of the miner's lantern that shines while he's still looking for his family. Since members of the Cherokee tribe are believed to be the first people to witness the light over a century ago in 1836, there's also a legend that the light is the spirit of an Osage chief who's had his life taken in the area and that it still roams around the area today. But this isn't the only Native American legend surrounding the light. A different tale states that the light is the joined spirits of the Quapaw couple who fell in love, but were forbidden from getting married by the woman's father, since the young man that she was in love with wasn't wealthy enough. Against his wishes, they decided to run away to get married, but her father got wind of their plans and sent a group of warriors to chase them down as they ran through the forest. Before they could catch up, though, the couple had reached the edge of a cliff over the Spring River, and while holding hands, they jumped, losing their lives in the process, but they're said to still return to the area in the form of the ghostly light. Many investigations have been conducted to try and explain what the light is, with several of these taking a more scientific approach. One such study concluded that the light is probably the result of car headlights that can be seen in the distance on Route 66. But this doesn't explain how the light was able to appear back in 1836. It's also been suggested that the light is created by gases or atmospheric conditions in the area. It is entirely possible that an electric charge created by the shift of large rocks that grind against each other underground is responsible, but as with every other theory that's been put forward, this remains mere speculation, as no solid proof has been found to definitively put the phenomenon to rest. The Joplin light is a phenomenon that's left people scratching their heads for hundreds of years, and it's likely to keep doing so for a very long time to come. Number 9. Between the months of May and September of 2009, people living in the areas between Brandesburton and Wilsthorpe in Yorkshire, England, reported seeing strange lights and triangular shapes in the sky, and one elderly couple in particular had an experience that they're still unable to explain. This event, which took place in Wilsthorpe Beach, an area that's now been dubbed the Roswell of Britain, occurred on the 14th of September at around 9 p.m. The couple, whose names have not been made public, were in their apartment, which has a very good sea view, and they were getting ready to go to sleep for the night. But as the woman switched off the lights in the apartment, she noticed that there was a strange glow coming from inside, and she later stated that something seemed to urge her to investigate. She then opened the front door and walked outside, and this is when she saw a group of brightly glowing objects hovering in the sky above the ocean and coastline. She would later tell investigators that she estimated the objects to be about 15 feet in length, 8 feet wide, and shaped like boomerangs. Making the event even stranger was the fact that there weren't just a few of these objects, but as many as 40 hovering in a circular formation. And although they made no sound whatsoever, they could see bolts of electricity being fired from the objects into the water, causing the ocean to bubble. The woman's husband joined her to look at the strange sight, but it unnerved him so much that he decided to go to bed after 10 minutes instead. The woman saw this as a once-in-a-lifetime sighting though, and remained outside to see what transpired. After about 30 minutes of the same continuous activity, some of the objects started to depart at an upward angle of about 45 degrees, 2 at a time. Eventually, just 2 of the objects remained, but they soon also departed, flying directly upward into the sky and out of sight. Remarkably, the beach where it all happened was inundated by military helicopters and personnel the following day, prompting many people to speculate that these craft were of extraterrestrial origin. One local man who owns a bait shop in Millsthorpe also later reported that while 2 of his employees were on the beach earlier that same day, they saw triangular objects flying into the ocean, and shortly after, military officers were everywhere on the beach. A paranormal investigator named Paul Sinclair has added that this wasn't the first case of strange objects flying above the area, as he's witnessed the same kind of activity on several occasions. During one incident that occurred on the 10th of May, 2009, he spotted a strange pink-colored UFO flying over Flamborough Head, which is about 9 miles from Millsthorpe. This object was accompanied by 3 others that were shaped like stars, and less than a week later, another massive object was in the skies over Driffield. Other witnesses came forward to report that they'd seen sphere-shaped objects hovering over the coastline, as well as other craft that were reported as being circular, and in other instances triangular or oval. Some of these objects are said to interfere with vehicles that get too close, as they suddenly stop running, but then return to normal once the objects leave the area. One such incident was reported by an off-duty police officer who was driving from Barmstead. He stated that as soon as the tubular object appeared in the sky, his car's headlights suddenly dimmed, and he had no plausible explanation. Sightings of this type of activity aren't unheard of in Yorkshire though, as they've been reported for decades. One such incident took place back on the 19th of September in 1952, when a Royal Air Force fighter jet was on its way to the bomber station called Topcliffe, and it was seemingly being followed by a disc-shaped craft. People who saw the event unfold stated that the object seemed to rotate as it flew past, and after a short while, it suddenly turned to the west and flew off at incredible speed, leaving them baffled. A far more frightening incident occurred in November of 1980, when an off-duty police officer reported that he was out looking for cattle that had been reported missing, and he saw a huge object flying in the sky. 2 other officers also saw the object, but the off-duty officer realized later that he'd somehow lost time, and he believes he was abducted by beings aboard this craft. Paul Sinclair continues to investigate these strange sightings, but has stated that he's yet to find irrefutable proof that these incidents are connected to extraterrestrial beings. Number 8. On the 21st of February, 1997, a man named Mel Waters phoned in to Coast AM, a late-night radio show hosted by Art Bell, with some incredible claims that many people are still talking about today. Waters stated that he found a hole in the ground on a property that he owned in an area near Ellensburg, Washington, and that the hole seemed to be bottomless. This was a bold claim by itself, but this wasn't the most disturbing thing about his tale, as he added that it also had some other strange and unsettling properties. Bell was unable to get the hole's exact location from the caller, but Waters did say that it was situated in Washington and that his property was situated close to the Manistash mountain range. His first claim was that he attempted to measure the hole's depth by lowering fishing line down, but when he still hadn't hit the bottom after about 15 miles, he gave up. Next, he stated that when one of his neighbor's dogs died, they decided to dispose of its remains by throwing it into the hole, but to their great surprise, the dog came back to life and returned to its home shortly after. He also added that the dog no longer recognized its owner, and that his own dogs would never venture close to the hole, as if they sensed something strange was going on. Then there's the claim that a black beam can sometimes be seen coming out of the hole and stretching into the sky. This beam has been seen by other people as well, one of which is a man called Red Elk, who added that he believes the hole has a guardian that takes the form of a lamb. On one such occasion, according to Waters, he lowered a bucket of ice down into the hole to see what would happen, and when he pulled it back up, the ice was not only still frozen, but somehow warm to the touch. He then realized it was no longer ice, but some strange flammable material instead. He conducted many more experiments, most of which had a strange outcome. When he yelled down into the hole, he could hear no echo at all, and so he decided to throw large items, including a fridge and a television, down, but again, no sound was ever heard. On another occasion, he brought his radio with him when he visited the hole, and he tuned it to the same radio station that he always listens to. But a short while later, the radio started emitting strange voices that he'd never heard before, and playing music from a bygone era. Waters would call the show on a few more occasions, but never revealed the location of this bottomless pit. In one of his last calls, he claimed to have placed different types of metal near the hole, and that they were then transformed into completely new types of metal, without explanation. Waters would eventually call in to say that his land had been taken away from him by the government. He said that on one occasion he was heading out from the pit when he came across a man in a suit who told him that he could go no further since a plane had crashed nearby. He then noticed that there were several other people present who were wearing hazmat suits, and shortly after, he was given an undisclosed amount of money and told to move to Australia and not to come back to the area. But he defied that order and traveled back to Washington 2 years later. But he says he regrets doing so, as he has no memory of the 2 weeks that followed, and when he came to, he'd been dumped on a street in San Francisco. Some of his teeth were missing, and he had marks on his arms that indicated that he'd been placed on a drip. All he knew was that the land was now somehow the property of the US government, and that he was being followed around by people that he didn't recognize. There are many theories surrounding Mel's hole. Red Elk stated that he had seen many UFOs flying in an area over the hole, and he believes that an extraterrestrial pit exists at the bottom of the hole. Since we don't know whether Mel Waters is the caller's real name, and he never disclosed the hole's location, there's no way of telling whether his claims are real or even if the hole exists. But it's a mystery that has intrigued paranormal enthusiasts for a long time, and likely will for many more years to come. Number 7. A village called Al Madam is about an hour from Dubai, and it's now considered to be a ghost village as it's been abandoned and is slowly being overtaken by the surrounding desert. It's said that the village was once a prosperous little area, but when people started noticing strange paranormal activity going on, they decided to abandon it, and some of their personal possessions can still be found beneath the ever-encroaching sand. Though many sources claim that the village is as old as the first millennium BC, it is in fact much younger, as it was constructed as part of the Shabi housing project sometime in the 1970s. There's been much speculation as to why the village has been abandoned, and one of the most often told tales claims that it was haunted by an evil female jinn known as al-Dawais that drove people out of their homes out of sheer fear. What makes al-Dawais so dangerous is that she takes on two different shapes and personalities, the first being that of a beautiful woman with green eyes and beautiful dark hair. But when she changes form, she transforms into a nightmarish figure with cat's eyes, sharp teeth, and long talons in which she carries a long, sharpened blade. One of the first accounts of the Al-Dawais came from a group of traders who were traveling through the area when they happened upon her in her beautiful form. They were so taken by her beauty that they gathered flowers and presented them to her as a gift. But this is when she showed her monstrous side. They heard an inhuman scream coming from the cave where they found her, and thinking that something was wrong, they ran over to check on her, but instead they found a monster waiting for them that then proceeded to end all of their lives after a brutal fight. Al-Dawais is said to be immensely strong, and that no man could ever be a match for her during a fight. But there's also claims that she can be defeated by presenting her with one particular amulet. The story goes that a man by the name of Rashid was once beset by Al-Dawais, and he quickly realized that he was no match for her, as she had superhuman strength. The Jinn was robbing him of his life force when he remembered that he was carrying an amulet that had been gifted to him by his grandmother. He quickly grabbed the amulet and thrust it into the Jinn's face, causing her to jump back in fear before letting out a banshee-like scream and suddenly disappearing before his eyes, leaving him wondering what he had just experienced. But the Jinn had merely retreated for the time being, and according to some legends, she continued to harrow the people living in the village until they could no longer stand living there, and they eventually moved on to greener pastures. Other stories tell of a beautiful woman who's found wandering in the area, lost and confused. She'll then tell anyone nearby that she's in need of help, and given her allure and beauty, they're always too happy to comply, but she then transforms into her monstrous shape and devours her would-be savior. Many people believe that the Al-Dawais was dreamed up as a method of keeping people indoors after the sun had set, or that she's a fictional warning to men who tend to be unfaithful to their wives. This has resulted in a few strange rules that most men in the area still follow today. This includes advice that they should never talk to a woman who they don't know after the sun has set, and that if they're tempted by an Al-Dawais, they should call on the name of God to drive her away. One man is said to have encountered one of these creatures in recent times and lived to tell the tale. He stated that he was drawn to by the Jinn by her remarkable smell, as he was on his way home after attending a feast. After encountering the amazing fragrance, he heard footsteps behind him and found that he was being followed by a beautiful woman who turned into a nightmarish creature that was intent on ending his life. But he started chanting God's name repeatedly, causing the Jinn to recoil in horror and flee. Thanks to these spooky tales, Al-Madam is becoming a very popular tourist attraction that's open to members of the public at all times. Number 6. The Valley of Bonnie Water is where you'll find a village called Bonnybridge. And although most of us may not have heard of this Scottish hamlet, it's said to be one of the biggest UFO hotspots on the planet. Bonnybridge is situated between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and while it was once known as an important trade location, it's now better known for the strange sightings that are reported there, as more than 300 sightings of UFOs occur there every year, resulting in its moniker, the Scottish Roswell. One of the earliest and probably most famous UFO encounters in Bonnybridge involved a man by the name of James Walker, who recalled an experience that he had in 1992 while he was on his way to the village from Falkirk. He found himself driving along a lonely country road when a star-shaped UFO suddenly descended in front of his car, forcing him to stop. He stated that it shone brightly and that he was intently terrified, but it merely hovered in the air in front of his car for a short while, before suddenly flying off at tremendous speed and out of sight. As soon as the object was gone, he put his car in gear and fled the area as quickly as he could. This is just the first of thousands of sightings that have taken place here over the decades, and many more are reported each year. Another well-known encounter took place in 1994, as 3 cleaners were traveling to work. They suddenly became aware of 5 strange craft hovering in the sky above them, and they quickly rushed to work where they told their boss what they had seen. Incredibly, several of the other employees then came forward to state that they had also seen strange glowing orbs and flashing lights in the sky during the previous week, and no one had a solid explanation for what they could be. But one of the most unsettling encounters happened in November of 1979, when a forestry worker named Bob Taylor was told to inspect a plantation that's situated near the M8 motorway. While walking through the trees, he spotted a clearing and made his way toward it. But then he suddenly realized that a large spherical metallic object was hovering above the middle of the clearing. He decided to take a closer look and described it as being around 12 feet high with a diameter of about 20 feet. As he got closer, the object suddenly dipped downward and released two metal spheres that had metal spikes protruding from them. To his horror, the spheres seemed to know that he was there and they started chasing him, and try as he might, he couldn't get away. One of the spheres became snagged on his pants leg and started pulling him backward towards the large sphere, and this is when he lost consciousness and woke up about 20 minutes later to a strange hissing noise and saw that the sphere was no longer there, but found that he couldn't move his legs. He managed to slowly crawl back to his vehicle, which he'd parked about 100 yards away from the clearing. He then reported the incident, which was thoroughly investigated, and it was noted that strange markings were found on the ground in the clearing, and no explanation was ever found. Bonnie Bridge has been the site of so many UFO sightings that local councilors have written to high-ranking officials many times in hopes that the phenomenon will be properly investigated, but nothing has come of the letters as of yet. Bonnie Bridge certainly isn't the first place most people think of when discussing UFOs, but locals believe there's a very good explanation for these frequent sightings. One theory is that the Falkirk Triangle, which includes Bonnie Bridge, acts much like the Bermuda Triangle, in that it's an area where the veil between our dimension and another is especially thin. Another, more outlandish theory is that the area lies directly in the path of an intergalactic highway of sorts, and that the strange objects seen in the area are merely passing through, or stopping in the area out of curiosity. Some people believe that these objects aren't extraterrestrial craft at all, but that they're secret military aircraft that are being tested in the skies over the village and the surrounding Scottish lowlands. Others think that it might be a natural phenomenon created by the bogs in the area, and that the hovering lights are created by gases that are released from these bogs. But these claims have been refuted by people who claim to have been abducted by strange alien creatures, and who are adamant that they saw physical craft flying overhead with their own eyes. Number 5. Not all strange sightings are considered to be paranormal in nature, as is evidenced by a mystery that's left people in some of America's major cities completely baffled. These sightings involve several strange mosaic tiles that have since become known as the Toynbee Tiles, but no one knows where they come from. The first of these tiles was found in Philadelphia in the 1980s, and although they aren't considered to be otherworldly or ominous, they certainly are mysterious as their creator has never been identified. The tiles typically include strange phrases, one example being Toynbee idea in Kubrick's 2001 Resurrect Dead on Planet Jupiter. They're believed to be constructed from pieces of linoleum and crack asphalt sealant, and have been found not only in Philadelphia but also in St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Connecticut, Washington, New York, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and parts of South America. The tiles are usually discovered during the summer months, likely because they're stuck to the ground using asphalt sealant that only becomes more adhesive as cars, trucks, and pedestrians pass over them. It's been speculated that the tiles are created and then wrapped in tar paper before being placed in the desired spot. When the tar paper is gradually worn down by traffic, the message beneath is revealed, but it isn't known how long this process usually takes, and so there's no way of telling when each tile was placed in its spot. There have also been suggestions that the tiles are created by a group of people as some kind of art installation, but most people who have followed the story for a while agree that the tiles are probably created by one person. As for the placement of the tiles, it may not be quite as measured as one believes. A theory has been put forward that the artist first creates each of the tiles, after which they drive through the chosen city and release the tile through an opening in their vehicle's floorboards. Many people believe this theory to be correct, as some of the tiles are oddly positioned, and since the artist has never been seen placing any of the tiles, even by CCTV security cameras in these areas. As for the strange messages that are placed on the tiles, they're thought to originate from Stanley Kubrick's movie, which is called 2001: A Space Odyssey, which tells the tale of a man who's reborn as the Star Child, after passing through a portal in space as he and fellow astronauts journey to Jupiter. They've also been likened to the Ray Bradbury tale, Toynbee Convector. a short story that involves a time traveler who travels back to our time after visiting the future to share information that'll help us create a better future for ourselves. It has been speculated that a man by the name of James Marasco has something to do with the tiles, since he was the creator of the Minority Association group, which believed that Jupiter could be colonized by humans that were resurrected on the planet after they passed away. He's openly stated that he got the idea from a book written by author Arnold J. Toynbee, further fueling speculation that he's the one responsible for the tiles. This theory was further bolstered when several tiles were found to contain messages about how the tile's creator was wronged by the media. Marasco had a tainted relationship with the media, since he became somewhat of a laughingstock thanks to his outlandish suggestions. The tiles claimed that the artist survived an attempted hit on his life, and that he eventually fled to England, but he was found there and brought back to America. But many people have pointed out that some tiles were discovered in the 1990s. They claimed they were created by a single person. Fewer tiles were discovered from 2011 and onwards, but they seem to have seen a resurgence in recent years, as more tiles have been found in New York and Philadelphia. Some people believe that the artist may have fallen ill during that time, or that they simply stepped away from the project for a while for unknown reasons. Though there has been speculation that the original artist has passed away, and that the project has now been taken over by a new tiler. Actor Justin Dwyer has stated that he knows who the artist is as he's met him before, but he's declined to reveal their identity. Many people follow the story of the Toynbee tiles and hope the artist's name will eventually be revealed, but many other people prefer not to know who the artist is, proving that most people just love a good mystery, no matter how small. Number 4. During the Norman Conquest, which lasted from 1066 to 1071, a Norman knight called Ralph de Pomeria received a piece of land in South Devon, England, from William the Conqueror as a way of giving thanks for his loyalty. De Pomeria then used this land to build a manor house for his family and their descendants, who would call the castle home for the following 4 centuries. The castle would eventually be built in the 15th century and sold to Sir Edward Seymour in the 1540s. Jane Seymour, the 3rd wife of Henry VIII, was Sir Edward Seymour's sister, but he proved unpopular in the area, as he soon acquired many enemies who wanted him ousted from the castle. This was eventually successfully done in 1552 by the Earl of Warwick, who had him locked up and eventually executed. The castle remained in Seymour's family's possession until 1688, after which it was abandoned and left at the mercy of the elements. Hence, today the castle is nothing more than a set of dilapidated ruins that's owned by the English Heritage, a charity organization that looks after and restores historic buildings. But the site is said to be haunted by several spirits. The 2 spirits that are seen more often than any others are the Blue Lady and the White Lady, each of whom has their own tragic tale to tell, according to those who have seen them in the strange ruins. It's said that the Blue Lady was the daughter of one of the lords who lived in the castle at one point. She had a child who then had its life ended by her father, though some people believe it was the Blue Lady herself who committed the deed. She's been seen by many witnesses who report that she seems to lure them deeper into the ruins, and before they know it, they've become hopelessly lost. Another tale states that visitors to the castle are lured to a tower where the Blue Lady lived, and when they eventually get to the top, they fall over the edge and lose their lives. As for the spirit of the White Lady, it's believed to belong to Margaret Pomeroy, who was kept as a prisoner in one of the castle's towers called St. Margaret's Tower by her own sister Eleanor, who was jealous of her beauty since they were in love with the same man. She would eventually lose her life to starvation and has been seen by many visitors standing in the tower where she was held captive, waving to those who pass by below. She's also been spotted walking around in the ruins of the castle's dungeons. Some people have reported having close encounters with this spirit as they walk through the ruins. They claim to have felt a strange chill as the ghost brushes past them on the staircase that leads down to the castle's dungeons. But this isn't the only strange activity that's been reported by visitors to the site. There have been sightings of the spirit of a guard who once served at the castle. Those who have seen this apparition state that they could see right through it, though they could see the guard was missing some of his teeth as he stood unmoving, except for the shaking of his head. One group reported that they saw a ghost of an elderly woman standing at the foot of the St. Margaret's Tower, and that they managed to muster up the courage to approach her, and when they did, she uttered the words, "Beware the hour." They realized that it was exactly 1 a.m., and when they looked back at the area where they saw the woman, she had inexplicably disappeared into thin air, as if she'd never really been there at all. This is when they heard a blood-curdling screech, and at the same time, one of the castle's wooden gates started to shake uncontrollably without explanation, and they decided it would be better to leave as quickly as possible. Then there's the spirit of a woman wearing a gray dress that's also been seen by many people, with an apparition of a man who's dressed in a cavalier-style clothing. There have also been reports of strange cold spots in the ruins, as well as unexplained flashing lights and disembodied voices that seem to come from nowhere. Added to this are reports of shadow figures that seem to move only in one's peripheral vision, and they never truly are spotted, though many people are adamant that they're present in the castle, and it's thought that they may be evil spirits or malevolent beings of some kind. One man claims to have seen the spirit of a child in the ruins after he and a friend noticed that it had suddenly gotten very cold around them. They decided to leave, but the chill followed them even after they got into his car and drove away. Both men experienced this intense chill for at least 2 hours after they got home, and they believed that the spirit followed them home as a warning not to return to the castle again. Number 3. When one thinks of UFO activity, the Kingdom of Lesotho in southern Africa isn't the first place that comes to mind. But one man claims to have experienced an extraordinary event there that he's never been able to explain. The man in question is a farmer named Peter Lashasa, who reported that he heard a strange sound coming from the sky over his farm on the 15th of September 1995, at around 9:15 p.m. He said that the sound disturbed the cattle on his farm, and that they had started acting irritated and scared. He decided to take a closer look, but before he could do so, he heard the sound of a dull explosion, and he decided to walk in the direction of the sound. But before he could venture too far, several of his neighbors arrived at his property to tell him that they had seen a strange light in the sky and had been monitoring it for a while. They added that they watched the object travel towards a set of nearby hills before it seemed to run into trouble and crash to the ground, after which they saw an explosion and a series of intensely bright flashes. The entire group then decided to investigate, and as they got closer to the site of the crash, they started to hear a sound similar to that of humming electricity. When they approached the site, they found a metallic-covered craft that had crashed to the ground, but they were unable to get any closer, since it was radiating heat so intense that it set fire to some of the surrounding grass. For a moment, Peter thought he could see movement inside the strange craft, and he decided to call the police as he was worried that someone may be injured inside. To do so, though, he had to travel to the police department, and by the time he arrived there, it was already close to 10:30 p.m. He spoke to one of the police officers, stating that a strange craft of sorts had crashed on his farm, and that there may be injured occupants inside. 2 officers followed Peter back to his farm and the crash site, where they found the disc-shaped object just as Peter has described it. In their report, they stated that it was about 10 feet high, with a length of around 60 feet. Strangely, they couldn't figure out how anyone would get in or out of the craft, as there were no doors, portholes, or windows to be seen. But they noted that the craft didn't seem to have any serious damage, despite the high-speed collision with the ground. The officer's report was then sent to the Lesotho government official, who turned it over to the South African Department of Intelligence, who dispatched 2 helicopters to the scene. After flying over the crash site, it was reported that a 437 square yard area had been set ablaze by the crashed craft. More soldiers were brought in and given orders to keep the area secure, even if lethal force had to be used. And the following morning, the soldiers were joined by members of the Foreign Technology Recovery Unit. According to some leaked reports, 3 occupants were found inside the strange craft, all of whom were still alive after the crash. They were reportedly taken to a research facility in Pretoria, South Africa, where they were studied. It's said that the beings found in the craft showed certain humanoid aspects, but that they also looked like reptiles with underdeveloped skeletal construction. Documents have apparently been uncovered that showed that the South African government went to great efforts to keep knowledge of the craft and the three beings from reaching the UK or US governments, since they wanted to secure any new technology for their own use. Many people have stated that the Lesotho UFO incident is solid proof of extraterrestrial beings that visit our planet, and that many of the world's governments have knowledge of these beings, but choose to keep this knowledge from the general public. There are many others, though, who believe the leaked documents were faked and that the entire event was a hoax, but this remains mere speculation, as does the existence of the half-human, half-lizard beings that were found inside the crashed craft. Number 2. Fairmont Chateau Laurier, a hotel located in Canada, officially opened its doors for the first time in 1912 after it was built by Charles Melville Hayes, the president of the Grand Trunk Railway. His vision for the hotel was that it should rival the most lavish and famous hotels in the world at the time, and he spared no expense in its construction. But Hayes would never see the grand opening of his prized hotel, as he was one of the unfortunate souls who perished during the tragic sinking of the Titanic on the 24th of April of that year, 12 days before the hotel was set to open. Since then, it's seen many famous faces, some of which belong to the heads of state, members of royal families, influential politicians, and well-known celebrities. It's also been the site for the filming of 3 movies, namely Captains of the Clouds, Little Gloria Happy at Last, and H2O. It's said that his passing added an air of mystery to the hotel, and that many of the ghost stories surrounding the hotel were in fact inspired by his untimely passing, and many of these tales are still being told today. Since the hotel has over 400 rooms, it's seen many guests over the years, many of whom are said to have never left as their spirits still dwell in its halls and rooms, most notably on the building's 7th floor. Many guests at the hotel have stated they get a strange feeling that they're being watched when they venture onto the 7th floor, and some have reported seeing the spirit of a child walking along that particular floor's hallway. There are also rumors that several people chose to end their lives by jumping from the hotel's top floor, and that the general feeling of unease that many people experience while staying there can be attributed to these restless spirits that have never left. The 7th floor was also used by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation for more than 80 years, and its chairman, Patrick Watson, lived in the hotel during the 1980s. He recounted a few unnerving incidents at the hotel, the first of which happened in his own room. Watson reported that he was awoken one morning by the sound of a loud crack, and at first he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. But when he got out of bed to investigate, he found that an ashtray on his bedside table had broken in half without explanation. But this was just one of many strange events that he experienced during his prolonged stay at the hotel. On another occasion, he was once again awoken, this time by the sound of a dull thud coming from his bathroom. He got up to investigate and was surprised to find his shaving kit, which he kept wedged between one of the sink's taps and the wall, lying on the floor with its contents strewn across the bathroom. Other guests have also experienced disembodied hands touching them on their shoulder on more than one occasion, voices that seem to sing from nowhere and everywhere at the same time, strange ghostly figures that walk through the halls, doors opening and closing without explanation, and pieces of furniture that inexplicably move on their own when no one is anywhere near them. Others have reported sightings of the spirit of Charles Melville Hayes himself, and it's said that since he was unable to attend the hotel's opening, and because he never had the opportunity to enjoy its opulence, his spirit decided to stay in the building after his passing, and remains there to this day, dressed in attire from the era in which he lived. While some guests have experienced strange events multiple times during separate visits, some have stated that they've never seen or heard anything unusual in the building. The hotel's public relations director has been working in the hotel for over 15 years, and she has stated that if the hotel is indeed haunted, she's none the wiser, as she's never had a ghostly experience of any kind. But she has confirmed that other staff members and guests regularly report inexplicable events, though it's more often the case that someone experiences a strange feeling rather than seeing an apparition or shadows moving around. Whether these tales are to be believed or not, Fairmont Chateau Laurier is considered one of the most haunted buildings in all of Canada, and it remains a popular destination, not only among those who are looking for an opulent stay, but also those who seek out the paranormal. Number 1. Alo Tower is said to be a cursed tower house that's situated in the town of Alloa in Scotland. It was built in the 14th century and served as the home of the Erskine family, which included the Earls of Mar. The first of the Earls of Mar, John Erskine, is said to be responsible for a wretched curse that was placed on the tower after he made an ill-fated decision to use stones from the ruins of Cambuskenneth Abbey during the construction of his home, which was called Mar's Wark. When the abbot of the church learned of Erskine's blatant theft, he became furious and marched up to the tower, where he laid a curse on the place with very specific predictions, and many of which came true. The curse read as follows, saying, quote, "Proud chief of Mar, thou shalt be raised still higher until thou sittest in the place of the king. Thou shalt rule and destroy, and thy work shall be after thy name. Thy work shall be cursed and shall never be finished. Then when thou seemst to be the highest, when thy power is mightiest, then shall come to thy fall. Low shall be thy head amongst the noblest of people. Deep shall be thy moans among the children of sorrow. The lands shall be given unto the stranger, and thy titles shall lie among the dead. Thou proud head and daggered hand must endure thy weird until horses be stabled in thy hall, and a weaver shall throw his shuttle in thy chamber of state." When the curse was done, the abbot had predicted that Erskine would have many children, but that none of them would bring his family honor. He added that the family's estate would eventually end up belonging to complete strangers, and one of his family members would survive to witness the house go up in flames while his wife was trapped inside. Furthermore, he proclaimed that 3 of the family's children would never see the light of day. The great hall that he had built would eventually become nothing more than a stable. The house's construction would never be completed, and the curse would only be lifted once an ash sapling sprouted from the top of Alo Tower. The family took little notice of the supposed curse until 1715, when some of the abbot's predictions started to come true. First, the family had their land taken away, after it was discovered that they were supporters of James Edward Stuart, also known as the Old Pretender. Things only got worse for the family in 1801, when several more of the abbot's predictions came true. John Francis Erskine is said to have been the next recipient of the curse, as 3 of his children were born blind and never saw the light of day. Shortly after, he watched in utter disbelief as Alo Tower burned, and to his horror, he realized that his wife was still inside and she never made it out. But he would have another 5 children, but he would disinherit his oldest son after he learned that he was addicted to illegal substances. The only part of Abbott's curse that didn't come true was the prediction that the manor's construction would never be completed, as it was finally finished in 1593, after which it was used by James VI and his wife, Anne of Denmark. In later years, the house was turned into a brothel that was used by soldiers, and it's believed that this was part of the abbot's curse that stated that the Great Hall would become nothing more than a stable, since it would never have been any of the Erskine family's wishes for it to be used in this manner. Then, sometime between 1815 and 1820, a brand new ash sapling sprouted on what was left of the tower's roof, and it seemed as though the curse had finally come to an end more than a century after the first event took place, and only after all but one of the abbot's predictions came true. Many people believe that the curse was indeed real, and that the Erskine family was made to pay for the misdeeds of just one family member. But not everyone is convinced that the abbot's predictions were as accurate as they're portrayed to be. Some believe that the family's misfortune had nothing to do with any curse, and that the tale was fabricated after they suffered one tragedy after another. Since this all transpired so long ago, there isn't any solid proof that a curse was laid on the family, but it is a mystery that's enthralled many historians for centuries. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.